Good evening and welcome to the last night of the second annual iHeart Pluto Festival. And what a spectacular day this is as we celebrate the 91st anniversary of Pluto's discovery by Clyde Tombaugh, as well as the exciting landing of Perseverance on Mars earlier today. So it really is a great day for space and exploration and science. And we have a really great panel tonight to kind of bring the festival to a close this year. This week we've had astronomers, astronauts, artists, educators, community members, family members of Clyde Tombaugh on. And, we thought it would be great to sum up the week by, kind of looking at all this and talking about why is there this love affair with Pluto? Why do we heart Pluto, as it were? And so we've got several people with different backgrounds that are joining us tonight. We have Coral Evans, who is the former mayor of Flagstaff, and she's actually coming from us live from the Orpheum Theater. At this time, 91 years ago, at this very moment, Clyde Tombaugh was watching the Virginian as he waited for the clouds to clear. He had discovered Pluto earlier in the day, and now he's waiting to go outside and take pictures of it, and he never could that night. Dave Eicher, who is the editor-in-chief of the world's largest astronomy journal called Astronomy Magazine, coming to us live from the world headquarters, I believe, of Astronomy Magazine. Al Tombaugh, who is Clyde Tombaugh's son. Clyde had two children, Al and Annette. And Al lives in Las Cruces, which is where Clyde spent the last several decades of his life. Jeff Hall, who's going to be monitoring our program tonight. Jeff is the director here at Lowell Observatory, and sometime on the side, I think still does astronomy, but he spends a lot of his time getting us through this time of COVID and moving forward. And then our keynote speaker for the festival this year, Dr. Alan Stern, who is the head of the New Horizons mission. And while he's the first one to point out that this effort took a lot of people, he was the one in charge and really led by inspiration. So we're really glad to have this group with us tonight. And I guess I should point out where I'm sitting. I'm in the plate vaults in the bowels of the observatory's Slipher building. And behind me are thousands of photographic glass plates, including one right above my head. There's kind of a more yellowish envelope. That's one of the Pluto discovery plates that Clyde Tombaugh was looking at on this day 91 years ago when he discovered Pluto. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jeff, and let's start the conversation.
Okay, thanks, Kevin, and thanks everyone for joining us for the wrap up to the iHeart Pluto Festival for this year. Great to have you with us, and great to have such a distinguished group to have kind of a high-level wrap-up conversation about this enigmatic little world 3.5 billion miles away with deep roots to Flagstaff. And we're going to start with a couple of general questions for each of our panelists just to let them answer and reflect on. If you have questions, you can type them into the YouTube chat and we will get them, and then I will pass them on to the appropriate person to answer. But this is indeed a good way and a good day of exploration to wrap up our festival this year. So since Flagstaff is the home of Pluto, I thought maybe we'll start close to home with some Flagstaff reflections and kind of move outward. And so the first question we wanted to pose to our panelists is just what is your personal connection to Pluto? How has it played a role in your life? What does this little world mean to you? And we'll start right here at home in Flagstaff with the former mayor of Flagstaff, good friend of Lowell and a good friend of our beautiful dark skies, Coral Evans.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hall. First of all, I'm excited to be here tonight at the iHeart Pluto Festival with everybody that's on the screen. It's absolutely amazing. And to be here in the Orpheum exactly 91 years to the day is, this is just such a sense of history that you have to sit still for a moment and just really take that in. So my personal connection to Pluto, I'm from Flagstaff. My family's been here in Arizona for 4 generations. And so when I thought about the question, I thought about myself as a child. I have a twin brother. I remember that we were at school, I think we were in second or third grade, and we found out that we had a planet, right? We had a planet. So I remember running home with my brother, and we got home and we sat our mom down and we're like, Mom, we have a planet. We got to visit it one day, right? And my mom, she was like, yeah, you're right. We do have a planet, and you never know. Anything's possible. And I think that really sums up how I feel about Pluto, and really how most of us here in the city of Flagstaff feel about Pluto. Anything's possible. It's our planet, and you never know, one day anything's possible.
Indeed, it is our planet, and we definitely love it. And someone, of course, else on the panel tonight with obviously a very deep connection to Pluto and its discovery. 91 years ago today, Al, your 24-year-old dad walked down right to my office, right where I sit, and said, I have found your planet X. And every time I tell that story, I just get goosebumps. So give us a little reflection on Pluto in your life.
Well, Pluto obviously played a very big role in all of our lives in the family. I was born in Flagstaff, Arizona in 1945. And I remember one of the first memories that I have was that my dad had done something special. And I really didn't realize what it was until I was in grade school. And of course, it changed all of our lives in the family and kind of drove the directions that we took later in life. It was an everyday part of our lives, both Dad and his reputation and his achievements. So it was very integral to the Tomball way of life.
Yeah, pretty monumental, certainly for your dad who discovered a planet. And Alan, I've heard plenty of your talks going back to the early days of the Pluto Underground and thinking about a mission to Pluto. And I think that was 1989 you got started on that, or somewhere around then. So this is a multi-decade odyssey. And reading your book, Chasing New Horizons, the main thing that I came away with from that book was what an absolute miracle it was that this all eventually actually happened. So tell us about your odyssey through getting there and leading New Horizons.
Well, Jeff, first I got to say it absolutely was a miracle. There were so many reasons it should have never taken place that through dedication and ingenuity and a little good luck, our team overcame all that. But, I listened to Coral's story and I really enjoyed it. And I have to say, it's kind of similar. I didn't grow up in Flag, but as a little boy, I was very interested in science, and particularly the space sciences, about the planets. And every book I would look in had this table about the planets that went from Mercury on the left to Pluto on the right. And as you marched across the table, they went from knowing like the period of rotation and if it has an atmosphere and how many moons, and it got murkier and murkier with distance. And then Pluto was just all question marks. And it always, for me as a kid growing up, was just this most mysterious outer marker place in the whole solar system. And then as I went to high school and eventually college, NASA had been exploring all the closer planets when I was a little boy. And then by the time I got to college, the Voyager program was on. And Voyager went to all 4 of the giant planets and wasn't able to go to Pluto. And I always thought that was some unfinished business. I never thought I would have anything to do with it. But a decade after that, we got that Pluto Underground started, and it mushroomed into quite an effort over a dozen years to get NASA to buy into a mission to Pluto. And for me and the New Horizons team, it really became an overwhelming part of our lives and our careers. It was a project with 2,500 people spanning 26 years to the farthest place that anyone had ever explored at that time. And it all worked out so wonderfully, not just scientifically, but also in terms of the exploration and how good it made people feel about, we can accomplish things that are larger than life. And that's a lot for a small planet to pack in. But it's been very meaningful, and I wouldn't trade that for anything else I could have done in my career.
That's great. That's wonderful. We'll come back to that bit about exploration a little later, because I think this is a really good day to be discussing that. But now I'd like to pass it on to Dave. One point, Lowell Observatory benefits tremendously from a very diverse and experienced advisory board. And Alan and David Eicher are both members of the Lowell board and give generously of their time to help our mission move forward, which we greatly appreciate. So Dave, publisher of the largest astronomy magazine in the universe. So, give us your perspective on this.
Well, I got very interested in the sciences when I was a young teenager because my father was an organic chemist. So I grew up around science at Miami University in Ohio. I didn't really want to do exactly what my dad did, though. Does any son precisely want to do that? So I went to a star party and saw Saturn in a telescope and was electrified by astronomy and exploration. Started a little magazine about star clusters and galaxies that grew a following. And some of the contributors to that were friends and followers of Clyde Tombaugh. So during the 1980s, I got to know Clyde and to go and observe with Clyde a bit at his house, to hang around him at the Texas Star Party and some other meetings. And I just really became a follower and admirer of Clyde being a hero of teenage years onward into the 1980s and early 1990s. Then I also, doing this magazine called Deep Sky, as well as working on astronomy at that time, had the chance to go out to Lowell and hang around the Pluto camera and assist Brian Skiff, who's still there at Lowell, doing some observing and projects, and write about that in the magazines. And at that time, there was a couch. When you took plates all night into the morning, there was an old couch, as I remember, in the Slifer building, and a portrait of Percival near it in the hallway. So when you worked with the Pluto camera and were in all of this sense of history in Pluto, went inside, fell asleep for an hour on this couch, woke up hazily and saw Percival Lowell staring down at you, in addition to Clyde Tombaugh and everything that he told us, there was a real sense that Pluto is in your blood at that point, I think. So that's how I got connected to it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And, I certainly remember as a teenager, being riveted to the original Cosmos. And of course, Carl filmed out here. And so, I was certainly aware of Lowell Observatory and of Clyde and all of this. And, who knew, right? So, yeah, and I consider myself absolutely blessed to have ended up at this wonderful town and this wonderful place on the hill. It's been a great place to work. And to think that the Kevin's standing right there and, it truly priceless, there's no value you can put on the plate right there behind Kevin, scientifically or in terms of the cultural and historical legacy of Flagstaff and the United States. So it's tremendous to be here and be associated with this little world. So now I have one quick question. Laurel Kornfeld asks, how can we get your Zoom background? Well, yes. So as you can see, I'm calling in tonight from the surface of Charon. I'm very, very rigorously socially distanced out here at 3.5 billion miles. So it's Googleable. There are many wonderful renderings of Pluto and its moons. This is one that I found particularly striking because it has this, it kind of looks like I'm sitting on a surface, and of course our favorite planet is in the background. So you can easily find that, and many other very well done depictions of what some of these worlds look like. If there are any other questions, feel free to type them into the chat. At this point, we will go we're back around, and now we're going to talk a little bit about the recent history and the impact of Pluto on, whether it's scientifically, on society. It's been a big 15 years for Pluto, right? We discovered it in 1930, and then it sort of patiently orbited along out there for 76 years. And then, the IAU axe fell in 2006. And I can tell you, I remember spending days on the phone, nonstop. A couple of us here just fielding questions from the media all over the world. And then, of course, 9 years later, the flyby, where the iconic picture of the heart was above the fold on pretty much every paper on the planet. And clearly, this is a phenomenon and something that really impacts us in different ways and has a real effect on us for some reason. So what do you see as sort of been happening since the famous demotion and then, of course, revealing this mysterious world just a few years ago and then flying on to other ones? How has Pluto factored in the last decade and a half? So we'll go around again and start with Coral.
Well, I would say that here in Flagstaff, the people that are from Flagstaff, we never accepted the fact that our planet was demoted in any way, shape, or form. Pluto is a planet. We believe it's a planet, and we love our planet, and we are fiercely protective of our planet. I remember the first time I heard it, I dismissed it almost as soon as I heard it. Like, that makes no sense. And who are the individuals that are trying to take away our planet, are demoted? And then there was a lot of chatter, right? There was a whole lot of chatter. I know that several of us were looking up and Googling the organization and what's a dwarf planet, and the word planet's in there, okay? To be very clear, the word planet's in there. And we just decided that Pluto's a planet. And just like you can change classifications, you can also redo classifications and put classifications back the way we think they should be. I think what happened, though, really, was that we remembered our planet, for lack of a better word. We discovered our planet, and there was a lot of buzz about it. And then Flagstaff got bigger, and other things were happening, and we kind of forgot about our planet and how important it was to us. We just kind of took our planet for granted. And so I know with New Horizons and the pictures that were on the front page of all the newspapers, it was like, told you we had a planet. And of course our planet's beautiful. Why would it be anything else? Of course our planet is cold and has snow and all. Hello, we're Flagstaff, right? Of course our planet has a heart. Would you expect anything different from our planet? Our planet is weird, it's unique, it's different, but it's us. And I think what was so remarkable was how our community came back together, and we're like, we are going to fight for our planet. And I think that's what you have seen since then, is just this really embracing and going back to our roots and remembering just how significant it is that we have a planet. We found it here, we discovered it here, it was unveiled here, and in some ways it found us, and that we need to make sure that we are reminding people of just how remarkable it is.
Yes, thanks, Coral. And indeed, I'm sure, Alan would agree. In your world, sometimes things are done by voting, but not in the scientific world. And that was certainly an odd way to go about reclassifying things. So let's move on to Al and hear your reflections on the rather amazing events surrounding Pluto of the last 15 years.
Let me start by saying we got at about probably 5:30 in the morning in August of 2006, I received a phone call from a press associate in Canada asking me what I thought of Pluto's demotion. I was totally caught off guard, had no idea what they were talking about. A little while after, and so I kind of stuttered through that conversation. Later, not very much later, my mom called and said that she had received some calls, and she said, "What happened?" And I said, "I don't know what happened. Mom, what's the background on it?" She said that she had received a call a couple of days before that from a member of the executive committee of the IAU. And that member said that during the executive committee meeting in Prague, that the committee had come up with a definition. We knew there was going to be some redefinition of planets. We knew that was on the agenda. But the representative from the IAU said that they had come up with a definition that would definitely include Pluto as a planet. So we were all caught off, totally off guard. Past that, we were shocked. And then as time went by, we wondered why that was necessary. And we got several explanations from some different wannabe authorities around the country. And we were still dismayed as to why that was necessary. We later found out what the process had been at the IAW meeting, and that was rather a sad way, in my opinion, and to go about it. Alan had described that in an earlier session, and he was right on by his definition of what happened. Past that, there hasn't been a day that's gone by when I am in contact with anybody that the question doesn't come up as to, what do you think about the demotion of Pluto? What's happening with Pluto? Is Pluto going to be turned back into a major planet? I don't think there's a necessity at this point to turn Pluto back into a major planet. I think Alan's definition that he came up with as a dwarf planet is totally adequate. It fits the situation. When you apply the geographical planet definition that he developed, it seems to fit. Now that definition, rather than the IAU's definition, still kind of takes us back a little bit in the family, because it's a little different with the two major points that would define a planet, but it makes sense. So we would have hoped that type of logic had happened to start with. I assume that we will continue to be asked every time that we encounter anybody that knows anything about my father or our family, the question of, what do you think about the demotion of Pluto, and is it going to be a major planet, and on and on and on. We're going to live with what has happened. We think it is very unfortunate that the textbooks have been made to turn Pluto into something less than a major member of our solar system, because that's simply not true. Other than that, we will watch the goings on. New definitions may come up, and we will be very attentive to that discussion.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Al. I can certainly attest to the fact that when we are open in normal times for public visitation, and I go up for the Meet an Astronomer nights, there is one question that I am guaranteed to be asked. When you open it up, is it a planet? And everybody wants to know that. And there's very good teachable moment in there about how to do scientific classification and the worth and the value of classification. And I think, Al, you're spot on. As we discover more things, classification is going to get revisited, right? The very first planet that we ever discovered around a sun-like star completely upended our idea of planetary system architectures, right? Because it's this huge Jupiter-like blob, but it's got a period of 4 days around its planet. What's going on with that? So, astronomers being the very resourceful and inventive types they are, we called it a hot Jupiter, all right? And so there was something entirely new, and that's going to continue to happen. I know Alan has a thought or two on the whole planetary classification issue and the demotion and the flyby. You're going to need to unmute. Yep.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm not going to rehash my presentation of the other night. But let me say, when we were on the way to Pluto, those of us on the science team for New Horizons knew that from the hints we got from ground-based studies and the Hubble studies, that Pluto would be something special. But I have to tell you, when we actually saw Pluto revealed in the summer of 2015, when we saw the world behind you with an enormous nitrogen glacier in the shape of a heart, about the size of Texas and Oklahoma combined, a world with clouds and haze layers stretching up to space, with 5 moons, mountains, snow caps, frozen lakes on the surface, all kinds of geologic activity, we pretty well knew that the solar system had saved the best for last. and I don't think anybody can top it. Even fans of the other red planet, we can talk about the wonderful landing on Mars today. But let me say that I think also anybody that takes a look at Pluto, now that we see it as a world revealed by New Horizons, knows that the real reclassification that's in order is a reclassification of the IAU. I like to reclassify them as the irrelevant astronomical union because they really put themselves in a corner and embarrass themselves. And I don't think that they have either the stature or the fortitude to admit their mistake. And it's kind of become a laughing situation that the most populous class of planet in our solar system, of which Pluto is the icon, the dwarf planets of the Kuiper Belt, are not considered planets. But then again, these are not experts. These, in planetary science, these are experts in black holes. And by their definition, no exoplanet is a planet either, because they only consider planets to be the 8 objects between Neptune and the Sun. And if that's not a crazy way to go about things, then I don't know what is in astronomy. And I think the reclassification of the IAU is in order.
And do tell us how you really feel about it, Alan, as we like to say. But I think you made, certainly I enjoyed your talk on that snowy evening several nights ago. And the definition you propose certainly makes a lot of physical sense. And
let me say that that's not the, thank you for saying that I propose it. But this is, as has now been shown in literature by Phil Metzger, planetary scientist, it's the definition that planetary scientists overwhelmingly use in the technical literature. And he can't find any papers that actually use the IAU definition because it's just so unworkable. So
I might mention that even Wikipedia has the geographical planet definition as their definition of a planet.
Yep. So I'm going to ask Dave to weigh in on this general question of the sort of the role of Pluto, and then we do have a couple of questions that have come in that are kind of pursuant to what we've just been discussing recently. So, Dave, your thoughts on this?
Well, Alan has both spoken and written at great length in much more detail than anyone else, of course, has about this. I've written a chapter of one of the books that I've done that's exactly in lockstep with Alan's view. It's not to rehash things, but, it's crazy that a definition of a planet should, in one respect, be dependent on where it exists. And of course, we could name some other planets as well that have not cleared their orbit. And that's become known since 2006. So there, as Alan said, there are multiple reasons why this thing falls apart. But looking at the astronomy enthusiasts, the people who love astronomy and space, and we have the biggest audience of those. If you combine, the print and the web and the social and everything, Pluto's bigger than ever. Jeff, you asked, where is Pluto now? Downstream from 2006. There are red Corvettes that people love more than anything in this world, this field, and it's the Big Bang and it's black holes and it's Mars and it's Pluto. And it is bigger than it's ever been in people's interest. So I don't think it's suffered a great deal at all. And I think the people who are really in the know are keen to what Alan and others have pointed out about the logical inconsistencies of this whole mess with astronomers trying to make this decision as they did. So I like to think also, speaking about the flyby and Alan's team and Alan's work, long ago, Pluto has kind of a unique position philosophically and emotionally for us all too. It was the extreme outer, and we were expanding the size of the solar system with the discovery. It was the farthest thing out there. And in more recent times, of course, largely thanks to Alan and his team, it's a gateway also now to understanding this large population of interesting objects that New Horizons has looked at, studied, and gone beyond. And so, it's really a unique and fulfilling object in that it's on the edge, and it also shows us that the solar system is much more interesting. There are a lot of other small bodies out there that are yet to be studied. So I think Pluto, despite the IAU, is stronger and bigger than it ever has been.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, there's a really neat point in there that connects to the artistic side of things. I'll come back to later if we have time. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. I'm actually going to take them in reverse order because one of them ties to some of the themes of exploration I think would be good to touch on. So the first one sort of goes back to the definition, probably for Alan, asking how was the committee able to make such a quick change that 2 years had gone into a definition. I know there's a huge long story behind that. Maybe we can just summarize that quickly.
I'll do it quickly. They screwed it up. They violated their own bylaws and rushed through a botched definition simply because they were afraid that somehow the public couldn't cope with large numbers of planets. In reality, that's not only anti-scientific. I think the public would love the idea that we have discovered that there are so many more planets and so many more types of planets. And, just as we used to think there were only a certain number of stars in the sky, and then Galileo invented the telescope, and every time we got a better telescope, we saw more stars. We didn't try to legislate that the only real stars are the ones that the ancients could see. That's about the equivalent of what the IAU did. Highly anti-scientific. Really, it's more dogma than science.
Yep, and some of my favorite objects to study are binary stars. I have no trouble thinking of the Earth and the Moon as a binary planet, right?
Or Pluto and Charon.
Yeah, or Pluto and Charon, absolutely. Okay, so then the other question that came in, and this is a really nice one, it's thinking about going back to Pluto, and we could get thoughts from everybody on this. The question probably will start with Alan. Has there been discussion of multinational effort to get an orbiter to Pluto, which is obviously a huge job, pool our own planet's resources. But of course, the larger question there is, the effort and the will to send these incredible little ships so far away that do the kinds of things that New Horizons and Perseverance have both done.
Jeff, I think there's broad agreement in the planetary science community in this country that the next step for the exploration of Pluto would be an orbiter. Rather than sending another flyby spacecraft or jumping ahead to a lander, because we don't know how to do that. We don't even know where to land. And we have two really good studies that have been done in recent years, one funded by NASA and one privately funded. And they both came up with the same answer. It's doable with current technology. It's doable within current NASA budgets. It would make a huge advance, but it'll take a long time, not just to build it, but we have to fly it across the solar system and bring it to a stop. And with today's technology, that means a very long flight time, almost twice as long as New Horizons, because you have to spend half the time braking. And the decadal survey that's going on right now at the National Academy is looking at that among the whole, palette of possibilities for big ticket flagship missions across the solar system. They probably only have enough budget to do one. So my guess is it's not time yet for the Pluto orbiter, that we might have another mission that's linked to the Kuiper Belt, for example, Neptune orbiter, that will study Triton, which was a Kuiper Belt planet that since got captured into orbit around Neptune. And it's kind of a twofer. You get the Neptune system plus another dwarf planet. Or a mission to go out and survey more dwarf planets like New Horizons did. I think those are probably more likely because we can do them more quickly. But I wouldn't mind at all if we got a Pluto orbiter out.
Yeah. So let's use that to jump to something I would like to touch on tonight, which is just the general value of exploration. And there's a question in the chat now from Claire Gibson that kind of points in that direction. What are your thoughts on how Pluto will continue to set the stage for public interest in science and exploration? We've talked about how, you've heard about 1 billion hits on NASA's website when the flyby happened and all of this. And of course, before we went on air, we were chatting and I was saying how, the night before the flyby, on July 13th, I ended up wandering down to the Overlook here in Flagstaff and just looking out across town at dusk and trying to project my mind 3 billion miles away to what was actually happening out there. And I had a very similar feeling this afternoon. That first picture popped in from Perseverance, from the HazCam, and you see this incredible plane of another world. And obviously Mars is a lot closer and it doesn't take quite as long to get there. But, you have that sense that, despite all the things going on in the world today, we humans can be really, really cool when we want to. And this is just an incredible thing that we do. So let me go around and just ask for a couple of thoughts on discovery and exploration. Let's go back to the home of Pluto and ask Coral about that.
Well, I sit here and I listen to what everyone is saying about Pluto. And I really feel that Flagstaff is one of the only places, if not the only place, right, that Pluto could have ever been discovered. And the reason why I say that is because here in Flagstaff, we have a serious sense of entrepreneurship. We're curious by nature, and we have a strong sense of place. We are the first international dark skies city for a reason, because we want to look up and we want to wonder. We have this sense of wonder to try to figure out what's out there. And so when you look at Pluto, when you think about Pluto, and what that means for future science and explorations, I feel that it reflects us as a culture. It's this odd little planet that's way out there, like way out there, and it's doing its own pattern, and it's being questioned whether or not it's a planet, maybe not, taking a lot of criticism, but it still manages to throw light back, right? It still manages to throw light back to us. And it gives us this sense of what's out there at the end of the dirt road, what's out there. And I think that the renewed interest in Pluto really helps spur that, and really helps say, hey, we're not done figuring out what's out there. We're not done by any means, because not only is Pluto there, and not only do we know there's something exciting happening there, but because of New Horizons, we know that there's a world past Pluto. We now know that. And so just us as humans, we're going to want to know what that is. And so I think that it just ties into our entrepreneurship spirit and wanting to know and wanting to figure out how we're all connected. And like I said, I don't think Pluto could have been discovered anyplace else but here, because that's just who we are.
Thanks, Carl. Very, very, very nice thoughts. Al, how about you? I mean, your father was an explorer who did a remarkable thing. This must run deeply in your blood.
Yeah, Dad was an explorer. He loved to explore. And exploration really is the major element of all of our human societal development. So without exploration, we certainly wouldn't be sitting here today talking in a manner that we are, or with the technology that we have available, or anything close, nor would we have a society that would allow it. So without discovery, I don't think mankind would be much of anything. It would just be another member of the animal family. So that's kind of my basis in that. I'm not a scientist. I was a banker and a developer and a car nut. So I don't pursue the scientific definitions of that, but I can certainly feel what the world would be without discovery.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the technology, and certainly one of the things is the incredible rate at which our technology advances, right? The power of the rover that we dropped onto Mars today compared to its predecessors, or Alan, the imaging capabilities you had on New Horizons, say, compared to Voyager, what we've been able to unlock as we build these progressively more sensitive and higher resolution facilities is just astounding.
If I could say a word or two, there's something in common about every time we go explore, whether it's with humans like in Apollo, or with this spectacular, hole-in-one landing on Mars today, or with New Horizons, or any of the other missions. And that is that they're inspiring to people. Apollo inspired a whole generation of of kids in the 60s and 70s to go into STEM fields. And those kids grew up in the 80s and 90s and powered the internet revolution, the PC revolution. They made our modern economy. And there's, and that's a byproduct of Apollo in a way. And I remember right after the flyby of Pluto, the very first public talk that I gave was something that the amateur astronomers will know. It's called Stellafane. Up in Vermont, about a month after the flyby, I went and I gave their keynote, and there were 1,500 people there, and a long line afterwards, for people that wanted to talk individually. And about halfway through this hour and a half long line, a co-ed said to me, she said, I have to tell you something. The whole meme for our generation, kids that were born around the year 2000 or the late 90s, is that we missed it all. We weren't part of the greatest generation. We weren't part of Apollo. We missed the birth of the internet and the computer revolution. The whole story is we missed it all. And she said, that flyby that your team did, that's the best thing that's happened in our entire generation. And I just want you to know that. And the interesting thing, first, it floored me. Second, what floored me even more is to this day, 5.5 years later, I hear that over and over from people when I give public talks or internet talks. I get letters every week from people who were moved by what New Horizons symbolized in terms of exploration and how it energized them, either to STEM careers or something, to think well of humanity, that we can do things that are larger than life. And I'm sure that the Perseverance team is going to be getting the same reaction, just like the Artemis teams will when we send women and men back to the moon later in this decade. And it's just the nature of this exploration. There's something magnetic to human beings that gives them this feeling that our society is more than just the squabbles we have among ourselves. It's really about something larger than life. And, I like to think that the time that we live in now with commercial spaceflight taking off and exploration of the solar system, this is the time they will look back on in 300 years and say, the early 21st century, that's when Star Trek began. And it's all because of our innate human need to be explorers. And what we accomplish through NASA and the other space agencies of this world to do something completely larger than life, not just to look up at the sky and wonder, but to go there and explore and someday to live in those places for the betterment of our society.
Now, I've got to unmute. Dave, your thoughts on the spirit of exploration, such as we saw today and we've seen from New Horizons over the past decade.
Well, I agree completely, with Alan. I think it's an innate and it's a necessary thing, and it provides so many enrichments that are unpredictable when that discovery, when that exploration is first happening. We're in a golden age of discovery and exploration in astronomy and in planetary science, whether it be with telescopes from the ground or with spacecraft as well, or with orbiting observatories. And we need to do much, much more. We know that the atoms in our bodies literally were created in Big Bang nucleosynthesis early in the history of the universe, or in exploding massive stars, or in colliding neutron stars. We're made of the stuff of the universe. The distance between Earth and the sun, 1 astronomical unit, if that were 1 centimeter, that's humans have traveled a tiny fraction of that distance. Pluto is about 40 times roughly larger than that distance. And the edge of our solar system is about 10 football fields off in one direction on that scale. So we're just starting to explore worlds like Pluto and understand what we're doing here. I think it's crucial for humanity. We're made of the stuff of the universe to understand why we're here on this planet, how this planet and our little solar system fit into the big picture and really what it all means. What are we going to do? Catch an occasional movie and go to Wendy's for the rest of time? We have to understand these things. It's part of humanity, and we're doing it now, and only exciting times are to come.
Thanks, Dave. So there's a comment in the chat that's very nice. I wanted to read from Stephen Silver for Al. I just wanted to let you know how much your father meant to me when I was growing up. I only met him once, but we exchanged letters across several years. And it's always nice to know that you had a positive impact.
Yeah, it is. I get that type of comment very frequently, and thank you, Stephen, for your comment. That means a lot to me, and it means a lot to the rest of the family that there was that much reverence for my father. He was a good guy. He was a gentleman, and he was a good father. So thank you for the comment.
Yeah, I can certainly, every now and then, an email will land in my inbox, and sometimes it's for me, but as much more often it's for one of our educators here at Lowell, and it'll be from a parent somewhere who said, "You literally changed my son's life or my daughter's life," because they visited Lowell Observatory and had their minds opened to something that they hadn't thought about. And there are very few things more satisfying than touching a life, particularly a young one, the people who are going to be the scientists and engineers who will carry on after us. So we're starting to get towards the end of our hour. Let me expand on one thing that Dave and Alan to some extent touched on and ask you to reflect on before I turn it back over to Kevin. And that is, when we finally got to Pluto, and as you said, Alan, we pulled it up and, it blew our minds because it was so radically different from what we imagined. And, for years I had remembered Will Grundy saying, his stock response when somebody asked, "What are we going to find when we get to Pluto?" And he would say, "I don't know, but it's guaranteed to surprise us." And indeed it did. And, exploration, as I think you all pointed out, reminds us how much we don't know. And it seems to me a lot of sort of our ground-based ills these days stem from the absolute certainty we have that our point of view is absolutely right. And somebody with a different point of view is stupid, or perhaps, as we've been conditioned over recent years, the enemy. And I think what exploration and astronomy teaches us, and we're trying to program this into our outreach offerings here at Lowell, it's okay to be uncertain. The universe is uncertain. It's almost like it's built into the fabric of the universe. And it's okay to not be sure about things. And, I just wanted to kind of throw that out and hear your thoughts maybe and reflections on the process of science and the value in being uncertain about things. Coral, could you offer a few thoughts on that?
Well, I just think you really tied a bow in that, didn't you, Dr. Hall? I mean, when you stop and think about the uncertainty, the difference, the not knowing, and the need to be curious about it and to be open about it and to want to then seek the answer, right? To be able to step back and say, you don't have all the answers and you're not right, you don't know, but you're willing to seek for it. And you're willing to do it in a group, and you're willing to go ask for help. Because Pluto wasn't discovered because of one person, but because of a collective of people working together to really support that person to finding Pluto. New Horizons, we heard about how many thousands of people were involved with this project to make sure that we could get these pictures. The hidden connections and the willingness to be surprised and then accept the answer that was different from what we expected, right? And then the willingness to say, hey, we still want to go out and find more because we know there's more there. I think that you could learn a lot from this little planet if you stop and think about it.
Al, final thoughts from you?
Well, the foundation of of exploration, of course, is uncertainty. Without uncertainty, there's no reason to explore. And then without exploration, there is no discovery. So it's absolutely a very fundamental part, particularly of the human experience. Basically, that's my feelings towards that subject.
Yeah, yeah. And Alan, I mean, you certainly are highly sympathetic to how nimble you have to be when crises come up and the unexpected happens as you're trekking across the solar system.
Jeff, you know this as well as anyone, but I'll just say, part of becoming a scientist is learning that being wrong is okay. As long as you are pushing the field forward with new ideas or trying to see through the murk of uncertain data to make an attempted step forward. And I remember once all of us who have scientific careers have published papers along one track, and later some data comes in and find out there was a better track. The science is self-correcting that way. I remember once I published a paper in Nature, which was flat wrong, it turned out later. And I was called by an editor of Nature to write a review of something else a couple of years later in Nature. And I said, I never thought you'd want to see me again after that paper that was wrong. And he said, oh, no, you're in the club now. I said, what club am I in? He said, you've been wrong in Nature. That's a big club.
A well-populated club, right?
The whole scientific method is about exploration and then a self-correcting system in which, it's okay to be wrong as long as you're helping to advance the field. And I think that's something about the scientific method that's really refreshing, that we could use more in everyday life, that it's okay to be wrong, it's okay to disagree. When I'm on the opposite side of a scientific debate with somebody else in the field, I don't disrespect them for being on the other side. And I think we should carry some of that into our politics and how we treat each other in society as well. We can respect that person's coming at it with the best of intentions, even though they see a different way than we might personally. And that kind of civil discourse that we have in science could go a long way in society right now, I think.
Yep. Thanks much. And you're absolutely right. It does propagate beyond your existence as a scientist. If it's an administrative decision here or something, I find a very useful exercise every day to say, I might be wrong about that. And if somebody emails me and says, dude, okay, yep, you might well be right. Dave, your thoughts on all of this?
Well, I concur absolutely that science is a self-correcting process, and it's important to think of things analytically and empiricism, observations, experiments, thinking of what facts really add up to a hypothesis or a conclusion, not what an authority tells you or a friend or you heard on television, your own independent thought that is analytical. Very few people have done that. And of course, the history of philosophy of science and pre-science of the last 2,000 years is perpetuated with finding out that how absolutely sure we were about everything, and turned out we were wrong at nearly every step. And we're not in the center of everything, nor are we the most important part of the whole universe. So we really can and should learn a lot from science. And we don't have to be right all the time, but we have to talk and communicate and respect the real knowledge that gets built up slowly over time, and all get along on this planet, because we can't even get ourselves at this point to Pluto. We only have a grand total of one planet to inhabit thus far. So we need to get along and take good care of this planet.
That's right. And I think pursuant to that, there's a question in the chat that Coral has already answered. I'll just briefly summarize it for everyone. There was a question about how the local government of Flagstaff works with Lowell Observatory, and I might add the U.S. Naval Observatory and NAU, to protect dark skies and reduce light pollution. And Coral answered that in the chat, and that it's been a long and close relationship here. But I would like to point out that, this is often something where it can be emulated in other communities. Sujay, you can also email me, jch at lowell.edu, and I'll be happy to talk to you about how the Flagstaff model and our approach can be propagated to other communities, because what we do would make a great difference in light pollution. I'd like to note, though, that this could be something that could be construed as combative, right? The observatory versus the city, but it's been very collaborative and very supportive, and an example of two different interests working together for something that really benefits the community. There's another area that I've been deeply involved with recently that I think falls in the same category. And it was mentioned before in our conversation, which is the sudden burgeoning of private sector access to space. And one thing we're seeing right now is the deployment of, for instance, broadband internet constellations. That's causing quite a stir in the astronomical community because of the impacts of satellite trails. I and the AAS committee on the matter have been working extensively with SpaceX. And, SpaceX is invested a lot of time and a lot of effort to darken their satellites. And I think we all need to remember that who knows what cool things might happen because as we begin to explore and we have more technology to explore. There could be areas not just for potential conflict, but for real synergy. And when different industries work together, really good things happen. So let me ask for any other questions from our viewers. We've got about 5 minutes left in the hour. Probably time for one more question if anyone has one. In the meantime, I'll simply say, great conversation, great way to end a great week and kind of a momentous day. It's I guess a fortunate happenstance that we had yet another plucky little craft land and get ready to do its thing in a really scientifically interesting area. We're going to have such cool results coming back from Perseverance. I can't wait to see what we get from that. Certainly can't wait to see what happens when we get to open your time capsule, Alan, when we get an orbiter out to Pluto.
You need to send a thank you note to JPL for choosing Pluto Day, the 18th of February, for their landing.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, a question coming in from Jeff Gagne. Let's finish up with this one, and it says, what few people would this panel want to listen to? And maybe let me, that sounds like, if you could meet or talk with someone from the past, perhaps relevant to science, perhaps not. Who might you want to have a chance to sit down and have lunch with? Coral?
I just stop and think about that. The first person was Neil Armstrong, and he was actually here in Flagstaff and spoke, and that was a phenomenal conversation.
It was indeed. Al?
Probably Wernher von Braun. He was the one that had the visions of the type of craft that we now utilize to get where we want to go in space. And I think that would be a fascinating experience. One of my earliest recollections was having a man sit on the sofa in our living room whose language that I could not understand, and asking my mom why he talked so funny, and that was Wernher von Braun. I never got to talk to him myself.
How about Alan?
I've been asked this question in a personal context before, and my answer is always that if I could have a situation like that, I would like to have my grandparents have a dinner with my children, who they never met. And in the same respect for the iHeart Pluto conference, I would like to have a dinner with Clyde and with Percival, and tell them a little bit about how it all turned out, and just hear that conversation.
That would be delightful. How about you, David?
Well, I'm doing some historical writing right now, so I'm going to go back a bit and say Albert Einstein, Galileo, and Isaac Newton. And I would both be enthralled and listening very carefully, and depending on the mood that Isaac Newton was in, ready to run out of the room.
Right. And I've been asked this question before too, and I would probably take a slight detour and say, I would love to spend an afternoon, as I did once, sitting in one of the pews in the Thomaskirche in Leipzig, and having a little conversation with Johann Sebastian Bach about his craft and his life. I think that would be a most interesting experience. So I think with that, we will call this a wrap, and I'll thank you so much for a great conversation. It's really been a pleasure chatting with all four of you, and I'll toss it over to Kevin for a few closing words.
Thanks, Jeff. What a inspiring conversation by an outstanding group of panelists. Thank you, Dr. Alan Stern, Al Tombaugh, Dave Eicher, Coral Evans, and Dr. Jeff Hall. This is a great way to wrap up the iHeart Pluto Festival, although we still have a couple things going on. Our local group of amateur radio operators are still going to be set up in our parking lot for a few days. And as of this morning, they had made 4,400 contacts in over 100 countries around the world, talking about Pluto. So in a manner that we might not normally think of, the ham radio operators are all about Pluto right now. So that's been a lot of fun. And our gift shop also has a lot of Pluto items. I'll point out, here's our iHeart Pluto hat and some other things. So if you've enjoyed this week and want to have some memory of it, we have a lot of great things there. And also, if you support what we do here at Lowell Observatory and like programs like this, I encourage you to go to the iHeart Pluto webpage, and in the upper right, there's a little donate button. And your support really helps us to do this sort of thing and keep spreading the inspiration and awe and wonder of space, because as we've heard tonight, it's really in our blood. So thanks everybody for joining us. And we look forward to hopefully bringing you here in person next year for the iHeart Pluto Festival 2022. Thanks and good night.
Night.
All right.